Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 3 tight end starter sits for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be going over my top 12 tight ends at the position this week to kind of give you guys a perspective on who should be starting and who should be sitting. Also, before we begin today's video, if you haven't yet already, click that subscribe button, join the community, and click that like button. I very much so would appreciate if you did so. It only takes half a second. Also, if you haven't yet already, click that bell notification button to be notified when my latest content is out so you can stay up to date on your fantasy football news, etc. All right, guys. Hey, how's it going? Patreon link down in the description for those of you looking to get all of your 2019 fantasy football questions answered. Okay, so the tight end video on a weekly basis is consistently probably the shortest one because you typically only own one of these tight ends. If you do own multiple tight ends, it's probably the lower end guys, so this kind of helps you out in that kind of case. But we're just going to talk about the top 12 tight ends. Matchups don't really matter because whether or not Kelce's in a good matchup, you're still playing him. Whether or not Vance McDonald has a great match, you probably only have him on roster. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to talk about the top 12 from top to bottom. Number 1, Travis Kelce, the best tight end in football. Maybe he could be overthrown by Mark Andrews in a couple weeks, especially considering they play each other this week. But Travis Kelce, associated with Patrick Mahomes in any capacity, makes you a more valuable fantasy prospect. The fact that he is the number 1 receiver on this offense in terms of targets and etc., it only leads to success for Travis Kelce. The matchup does not bother me at all against the Baltimore Ravens. Sure, they're a tougher defense to play against than the Raiders, but I still think Travis Kelce is going to get his, and that's why he's my number 1. Moving on, number 2, Mark Andrews. He has been unbelievable in the last 2 weeks, playing absolutely out of his mind with Lamar Jackson. He's probably the number 1 or 2 receiving option on this team next to Marquise Brown, and putting up more than 20 fantasy points each of the last 2 weeks in half-point PPR scoring formats leads me to believe that a Kansas City defense is not going to be able to stop Mark Andrews, and he's my number 2 tight end on the week. Full confidence, needs to be started. If he's not being started in your league, then I don't know what's going on. Moving on to number 3, Zach Ertz. Because of all the injuries that are taking place with the Eagles offense, unfortunately, Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey might miss time this week, and Dallas Goedert, the backup tight end, who missed last week as well, could miss some time this week. If that's the case, Zach Ertz is the number 1 receiving option of this team. Sure, you still have Nelson Aguilar in the slot position, running around, catching a couple passes here and there, but Zach Ertz is going to see, I'm not kidding, potentially 20 targets this week because of the fact that outside of Zach Ertz, there really isn't any other security blanket for Carson Wentz, especially when Carson Wentz begins to struggle. He looks for Zach Ertz and Zach Ertz alone. Going into this matchup this week against the Lions, it's not a great matchup, but I do think Zach Ertz is going to have himself one of those big weeks. Potentially could be the number 1 tight end on the week with the target share and the opportunity that he receives. Moving on to number 4, George Kittle. You have to play George Kittle. I know he's been very inconsistent in terms of not being able to put up a lot of points, under 10 points each of the last 2 weeks in half PPR scoring formats, but he's George Kittle. And I think he has to play without a doubt in my mind. If you don't want Kittle anymore, go trade him. But he needs to be on the field. He's being used as a blocking tight end as of late, but that's okay. Kittle's going to find his success. Eventually, it's going to come to him. And when it does, it's going to come out with a big point total. And I think this could possibly be the week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have struggled defensively in the last couple weeks. Kittle, who is used pretty much as a primary receiving target on this team, could have a big week. Moving on to number 5, Evan Engram. The whole question about Evan Engram is whether or not Daniel Jones is going to target him as much as Eli Manning would in the past. I really do think that with all the injuries that this receiving core has had, Sterling Shepard was out with a concussion. I think Corey Latimer is going to be missing time this week. There really isn't a consistent receiving option outside of Evan Engram. I think the offense is built around Saquon running the ball and Evan Engram in the passing game, which I think a rookie quarterback typically looks for his tight end who becomes their safety blanket. And I think there's always a possibility that Evan Engram even gets a boost in production and opportunity and targets because of the fact the quarterback switch has happened so early. So I think Evan Engram this week, I'm pretty confident that, I'm going to start him. He's one of the best tight ends in the NFL right now in terms of receiving. And absolutely, despite the matchup, I do think Evan Engram with Daniel Jones will be a success as the season moves on and this week. Moving on. My number 6 tight end, Darren Waller. So with Tyrell Williams being a little bit banged up and having to go against Xavier Rhodes of the Vikings, this is not an easy matchup. And I think Darren Waller is going to see a lot more targets than we anticipate because of the fact that, Derek Carr is going to have to get the ball out of his hands against this pass rush. And Darren Waller is probably going to be the guy to do just that. He's been a pretty solid receiving target for this team. We know how much Derek Carr loves to use the tight end position with Jared Cook last year. They've consistently done that with Darren Waller thus far. The guy has been putting up 8, 9, 10 fantasy points per week in the last 2 weeks, so in half PPR. So as of right now, Darren Waller as my number 6 option, a guy that has come out of nowhere, but similar to Mark Andrews, is a very big contributor. He's my number 6. Moving on to number 7, Vance McDonald. Now, Vance McDonald moves up the chart from not being on the list last week. Now, I did mention I would have him at number 13 last week, but that was the week of Friday the 13th. I was a little suspicious. Maybe he should have been on the list, but either way, Vance McDonald was used heavily when Mason Rudolph came in, took over the quarterback position, and going forward, I think if Vance McDonald ends up being a prime contributor, then maybe that Ben Roethlisberger injury wasn't a total bad thing. I think this offense could function in a way where if Juju Smith is being covered, double teamed for majority of the game, if James Conner is injured and their running game stifles or pretty much disappears throughout majority of the game, especially because of game script, there is a chance that Vance McDonald is used heavily in this offense, sees a lot of targets, potentially double digit, and in the red zone, as we saw last week, is a main target of Mason Rudolph. So number 7, why not? Moving on to number 8, Delanie Walker. My only concern with Delanie Walker on Thursday night is that I don't like playing receivers, running back, quarterbacks, tight ends, anybody on Thursday nights. I'm not a fan of that. He plays against a tough matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but we know that Delanie Walker is pretty much the number 1 receiving threat on this team. They want to run the ball heavily with Derrick Henry, and they're going to hit play action to throw it to Delanie Walker. Outside of that, we have super inconsistent Corey Davis, Adam Humphries, A.J. Brown. So as of right now, he is the best receiving option. So if he is your starting tight end, I don't mind putting him in this week. I just don't like the matchup in general, but I'm playing him. Moving on to number 9, Jared Cook. The reason why Jared Cook isn't any higher, which he should have been going into this week, is because Teddy Bridgewater. I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is going to be able to just sling it this week and have be able to impose his will on defenses, especially against the Seahawks defense that has been pretty consistent over the last couple of years, that has made improvements this offseason with Clowney coming off the edge now. I really don't think that Jared Cook is going to be very successful in the next coming weeks without Breeze, but there's always a chance that he could make a couple catches here and there, considering, Teddy Bridgewater does not like to throw the ball deep. He's going to throw it within the first 10 yards, and if Jared Cook has a bigger receiving target, all he has to do is throw it up, and the guy's going to catch the ball. He could be a pretty decent option this week, but I'm not saying this guy's even maybe a couple catches, 5 catches, 40 yards. That's what I kind of see in his future. Moving on to number 10, Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron is 100% dependent on a touchdown in the red zone. If Marlon Mack is not playing this week and he's not healthy because of that calf injury, obviously the injury report, if he's out on Friday, it's most likely Jordan Wilkins that it needs to be picked up on your rosters, but we're talking about tight ends. Eric Ebron is 100% dependent on the red zone work. If Marlon Mack is out, he is going to be the number 1 threat in the red zone for that team, and I think he could have a good week against as Indianapolis playing against Atlanta. So I have him as my number 10. Moving on to number 11, the other side of the ball, the Falcons, Austin Hooper against the Colts. I think Austin Hooper, unfortunately, is inconsistent, but comparatively to other tight ends, now that Hunter Henry's gone and there's no more David Njoku, Austin Hooper kind of moves up into this scale of being a top 12 tight end on a weekly basis because of just his opportunity, the snap counts, and just being a guy that is consistently getting the ball thrown toward him. Like, if there's another tight end out there that is seeing as many targets as Austin Hooper, I wouldn't even. It's tough because I know how much the Atlanta Falcons want to throw the ball, and I know how much Dirk Cutter wants to use the tight end position within this offense. Like, the question is, do you want an Austin Hooper or do you want an O.J. Howard? Sure, O.J. Howard gets to play against the New York Giants this week, but Austin Hooper, on the other hand, at least has shown that he's going to consistently catch a couple balls in a game. and maybe even have that touchdown, or maybe even have that big game if the other receiving options are being shut down. So just to put it in perspective, that's why I have Hooper here, and that's why there's no O.J. Howard on this list. But moving on, my number 12, Jason Witten. That is correct. Jason Witten in the last 2 weeks has scored a touchdown, which is absolutely incredible, which it kind of hurts Ezekiel Elliott because that's where majority of his touchdowns are coming. From the goal line, 5 yards and in, they hit him with a bootleg. Jason Witten somehow always open, scores himself a touchdown. And this week against the Miami Dolphins, I think they're going to be in the red zone very often. And I think if Jason Witten catches a touchdown, I'm not going to be surprised. Therefore, he's my number 12. I think he's a guy that if you're looking for that 6 to 8 points, he's going to get it for you. This week, certainly, because it's way too good of a matchup. And he's looked for very often in the red zone as a receiving threat. And that's why he's my number 12. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Again, like I mentioned, it's a pretty short video. It's plain and simple. Yep, that's right. The 1 through 12 rankings at my tight end position this week. I think all of these guys could have viable weeks. There could be O.J. Howard coming out of nowhere, out of the grave, out of the, the basement. That's where Bruce Arians has him. He has him locked away in the basement, having him block for Jameis Winston on passing plays instead of going out for routes. Hopefully we can change that around in the next coming weeks, especially into this matchup. But anyway, thank you everybody for watching. If you haven't yet already, click that like button, click that subscribe button, and I will see you guys tomorrow for the Hidden Gems video. Good luck everybody on your Thursday night matchups. Hopefully everything goes according to plan. Otherwise, it's Thursday night and you shouldn't be really surprised. Thank you again, and I'll see you guys. Peace.